Today we're going to continue our study of Science Chapter 3 with Lesson 2, Ecological Succession. We have 3 objectives today. You should be able to describe the process of succession, contrast primary and secondary succession, and explain how mature communities develop. All right, so succession. Let's talk about the regrowth of a forest. So this is, succession is the replacement of one type of community by another at a single place over a period of time. So the regrowth of a forest after a forest fire is an example of succession. So think back when we had the fire here in the mountains. So now they're going through secondary succession. So succession takes place in all communities, not just those affected by disturbances such as forest fires. So succession is always occurring. Sometimes a small community starts to grow in an area where other organisms had not previously lived. So nothing had lived there before. This would be primary succession. So over a very long time, a series of organisms live and die on a rock. That rock is slowly transformed into soil. Now other things can grow there. So primary succession. So this shows an example of primary succession. We have a slowly retreating glacier that exposes the bare rock where nothing lives. This is where primary succession will begin. Most primary succession begins with things called lichens. Acids from the lichens begin breaking down the rocks into small particles. These particles mix with the remains of the dead lichens, and they start to form soil. Lichens are an example of a pioneer species. So they're the first species to be there. And then after many years, you see the same place. There's enough soil for mosses to grow. The mosses eventually replace the lichens, and then insects and other tiny organisms begin to live there. When they die, their remains also are decomposed and added to the soil. And then over time, the same area, the soil deepens. The mosses are replaced by ferns. The ferns may slowly be replaced by grasses and wildflowers, like you see in the picture. And if there's enough soil, you'll have shrubs and small trees that will begin to grow. And then, after hundreds or maybe even thousands of years, the soil may be deep and stable enough to actually support a forest. So you can see all the way from primary succession to what it would look like hundreds or even possibly thousands of years later. Secondary succession. Sometimes, for example, the forest fires, you've got a community that's disturbed in some way. If the soil is left intact, in other words, if the soil is left there, the original community that was there to begin with may regrow through a series of stages called secondary succession. So something was once there and now it's going to come back. So secondary succession. So here is an example. So we have the first year after a farmer stops growing crops, or the first year after some major disturbance like a fire, weeds start to grow. You know, weeds can grow anywhere. In farming areas, you have crabgrass. That is the weed that often grows first. And then by the second year, the same area of land, you've got new weeds that appear. And then their seeds may have been blown into the field by the wind, or insects may have carried them. Horseweed is common during the second year. And then the same plot in about 5 to 15 years, you have small conifer trees that may start growing among the weeds. the trees continue to grow, and after about 100 years or so, you may have a forest that'll form. And then as older conifers, these trees, die, they may be replaced by hardwoods like oaks or maples. That's if the climate can support them. So this takes you through the steps of secondary succession. In the early stages of succession, only a few species grow in the area. As that community matures, it can be dominated by well-adapted, slow-growing climax species. And the variety of species that are present in an area is referred to as biodiversity. Bio, remember, means life. So a lot of diversity in the life that is there. Having biodiversity helps communities lessen the impact and the spread of disturbances such as insect invasions. As I said earlier, mature communities tend to have a lot of biodiversity. They're very well established. A mature community simply has organisms that are well adapted to live together in that symbiotic relationship in a same area over time. You're going to come back and watch the study jam on changes in ecosystems. And then this concludes our study of not only lesson 3.2, but of all of chapter 3. So again, short chapter there.